Okay. Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining LimLoges&Masters in this session. You're attending the second edition of our Ask the Expert sessions that are held online. My name is Lilia. I'm the managing partner of Asia for LimLoges&Masters, and we help companies transform their management, even operations if necessary, and through our three services in disruption management, in executive search, and transition management. So thank you for joining us today. I know there will be various people coming in and out of the session, don't mind them, but I wanted to introduce the speaker very quickly. We've got with us, and I'm going to share screen right now.
Okay, let me make sure that you have permission for that. Okay. Are you able to share right now?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Jean. Okay, Jean-Sebastien is our associate and also our senior advisor. He works very closely with us on AI issues and even software matters. And he helps consult with clients in terms of their needs, not just in AI alone, but in all their software needs and architecture. So he's 15 years as a software solutions architect. And in addition to that, he's been working with companies across multiple industries and, not just in corporates, but also in terms of entrepreneurial as well as social enterprises. So Jean-Sebastien is a graduate from Europe, and he's here with us today. We're going to be talking for 30 minutes in this session. Jean-Sebastien will make a quick presentation of about 5 minutes or so, 5 to 8 minutes or so. And thereafter, we're going to invite people to have questions ready. We have already received a lot of questions, so I thank all of you for sending in your questions in advance. I appreciate that very much. But in addition to that, we'll also try and include some live questions today. So without further ado, I want to ask Jean-Sebastien to present. All of us will remain on mute until the question and answer session, in which case then I will ask you to either unmute yourself or we go straight into questions that are found in the chat room. Thank you so much again, and the floor is yours, Jean.
No problem. Thank you for the introduction, Lilia. Just to correct, I graduated from Canada actually, but my school has a French name, so I think that's where the the distinction comes from. So
my apologies.
No problem at all. No problem at all. I'm still admitting some people to the meeting, but I'm going to start sharing the presentation and get started if that's fine with everybody. Just let me pick that real quick. Okay.
Okay, we can see you.
We're in. Okay. Sorry about the hiccups, everybody. But yes, introduction. Thank you for the introduction earlier, Lilia. I'm going to make it summarize everything you've said. My name is Jean-Sebastien Lemay. I'm a software solution architect, and I've been doing this for 15 years. And what my role is essentially is helping you make more money through technology specifically by building systems. And the process to get that done is essentially twofold. It involves understanding first. And what that means is we take your knowledge of your industry, of your business, your clients, and we mix that with our knowledge of technology, what's available, what's feasible, and we put these two things together to build a system that will take you where you need to be. And recently, a lot of the systems I've been building involve AI, integration with artificial intelligence, and that's why we're going to be tackling that topic today. So I think the first step to get started, which is really important, would be understanding what AI actually is, because I think there's a whole lot of marketing out there and some claims are a little bit misleading. Where everybody's talking about ChatGPT. Let's have a crash course about how AI actually works. So ChatGPT was actually born out of a process that we have been using for a long time called machine learning. And what machine learning is taking data and giving that to a computer and using an algorithm to teach the computer to recognize patterns in that data. So that's what we call training a model. So I've highlighted it here in the presentation. That's what conceptually a model looks like. An example would be taking pictures and using a machine learning algorithm to get the computer to look at these pictures and distinguish the patterns that make a picture a photo of a person versus a picture a photo of something else. And as you train this model, it starts remembering and recognizing these patterns to a point where later you can show it a picture it's never seen before. And because of those patterns it has learned in its artificial brain, it will be able to tell you if it's a photo of a person or not. Now, these teaching algorithms, these learning algorithms have evolved, and they've been able to start applying them to natural language instead of pictures or other types of data. So in the case of language models like ChatGPT, they were able to teach the computers to understand the patterns of natural language, the relationships between words and whatnot. And at first, they were able to get these language models to complete sentences. They would give it the beginning of a sentence, and they would be able to figure out what is likely to be the end of that sentence. And then they just kept fine-tuning that to a point where now we can publish a question to a language model, and it will be able to produce a human-like answer. That's what language models are. Based on their knowledge of language patterns, they're able to digest language, natural language, and produce natural language answers, which is actually really amazing that we can do that now. But I do want to add a caveat about this, which is that these language models, this is all that they do, right? It's a machine that takes text and produces text. And it's actually true of all AI. These models take an input and they can produce an output. Now, what they do is amazing, but it is all that they do. And we'll get back to that later in the presentation. It's just a note, something to take note of. Now, why is this revolutionary? Why is this amazing? Well, it turns out that for the longest times, computers were actually very, very strict about what kind of data they're willing to work with. I'll give you a simple example. If you're working with Microsoft Excel, you have to work with an Excel file. There's no other way, right? And if you're using some software, some system that needs information from you, you're going to have to fill in a form, which is going to be very structured. You're going to have to fill in different fields. And if you want to trigger an action, you're going to have to click a button. Everything was super specific and super strict. And now that we have these language models, now we can deal with natural language, which is a lot more flexible. And that opens the door to many amazing things, like the ability to have data processing applied to natural language. But it also opens the door to new ways for users to interact with systems, whether it's chatting with those systems or even using their voice. So it really opens up a lot of opportunities. And what we're going to do now is look at how some companies have leveraged this new capability to great extent. So for example, there's a startup here in Hong Kong that I'm involved with called Loban Connect. And their mission is to connect professionals who want to build up their career with employers who are seeking good talent, right, for their job listings. And we have an algorithm that computes the compatibility between candidates and employers. And that algorithm needs a lot of data to compute a good, reliable score. And what happens is we needed to collect all that information from the users, which means they had to fill forms. But now that we have language models, when these people give us their CV or we get a job description, we're able to ask the language model to extract a lot of information from those, regardless of how they're structured, because it's natural language, which means all of a sudden we can shave off 60% of the time it takes to onboard these users because we can extract information from these documents, and we couldn't do that before. Another example would be Impala, a company here in Hong Kong, which is responsible for producing technical documentation, instruction manuals. And they would get products from manufacturers with accompanying reference materials. And the technical writers would have to look at all these materials in order to figure out what to write in these instruction manuals. Now, because we have language models, we're able to pre-digest all these materials that come from the manufacturer and prepare a draft of the instruction manual with all the information that was mined from these reference materials, which really accelerates the work of these technical writers who just now have to revise and fill in the gaps. In that case, we're shaving off 80% of the time it takes to produce a user's guide, which is really great. Another example would be Lalamove here, a delivery services company. They have an app where users can publish written reviews about their services. And for the longest time, they had to rely on staff to look at these reviews to figure out what are people happy with and what are people unhappy with. Now that we have language models, we're able to automate that process because the models can digest these written reviews and extract information such as what people are happy about and what people are not happy about. And in this case, we're really talking about a full automation of that process of making these reports based on user reviews. So we're talking about shaving off 95% of the time it takes to compile that data and saving costs too. So AI can actually really do amazing things, and that's very exciting. But also, if you're thinking AI is so good, right, I'm just going to pay for an AI license and I'm going to fire half my staff and everything's going to go great, that's actually not going to happen. Let me tell you what's going to happen if you do that. Don't go in blind. This is an article from Forbes this year, very recent, it's from July, and it reveals that 77% of employees have reported that AI has actually increased workloads and hampered productivity. So what happened, right? Well, the truth is, these people, these companies who just took AI and released it in their business and said, go, right? They didn't know what you know today, which is that AI by itself doesn't actually do much. What they do is amazing, but they don't actually do much besides taking an input and producing an output. So actually they lost out, right? And in order to really understand and leverage AI, how it can be best utilized, you have to see AI perceive it as a component of a bigger system, right? And that bigger system is made up of traditional IT components that are assembled the same way we were building systems before AI became popular, right? It needs to be able to connect to a database. It needs to have a UI in front of it. It needs to integrate with the systems you're already using. That is the key to success, right? Is to see AI as a tool that becomes integrated as part of a greater system for if you really want to see the kind of gains that we've talked about. So knowing this, let's tackle the big question, who's getting replaced, right? Are we all getting replaced? Now, AI, by virtue of being a new technology, it will replace some people, the same way that ATM machines have replaced a number of bank tellers. But now that you're also aware of the limitations and actually the amount of work involved to make AI work, being part of a bigger system and whatnot, it's actually not going to replace everyone. Actually, what draws the line between what it's going to replace and what it can't replace is context. Because as intelligent as these language models seem to be, they actually can't read your mind. And in order to produce good answers, they need to know as much as possible about what they're supposed to do, which means you need to give them a lot of instructions to produce good answers. Now, imagine you're a manager, you're an executive. Every decision you take involves so many factors. You've got years of experience. You've got lessons learned. You know your customers. If I put you in front of a chat box and told you to write your whole life story, to write everything you've ever learned that you take into account when you make decisions, that would not really be possible. So in truth, AI is better suited for tasks that don't require too much context to complete. So for example, simple data entry just really asks that you have an input document and you do something with it. That's not too much context involved. But as soon as you're even writing emails or taking big decisions, the context becomes too big to actually fit into what you can tell the AI. And that's basically what prevents AI from really taking over and replacing everyone. So those of you who joined it with fears, I hope these fears have been assuaged a little bit. This being said, AI, I think, is a tool that can assist you in your tasks. And the same way today, I think it would be difficult to find an office job if you don't know how to use Microsoft Word or maybe Excel or even PowerPoint. I think in the world of tomorrow, which is very close, if you don't know how to leverage these tools, it might not replace you, but you might get replaced by somebody who does know how to make the best use of them. I think that's the key takeaway here. And so I hope that gave you a good overview of what AI is, how ChatGPT was born, what it can and can't do. And without further ado, I'm going to pass the control back to Lilia as we're going to move on to the question and answers part of this presentation. So Lilia, I think I'm unmuting
Thank you.
There you go.
Yes. Fantastic. No, thank you, Jean. I think that's great just to have a quick overview of, what you're going to be talking about and a few insights. We've had a lot of questions submitted, so we're going to try and aggregate some of these questions because some of them did sound like they were repeats of each other. What I want to encourage is for all of you, if you have a question, and we'll take some live questions as well, if you go into your React button right at the bottom of your Zoom page, you can pick the option of raising your hand. So please let me know if you have any questions and do that by raising your hand. Alternatively, you can post a question in our group chat and I'll pick that up as well. But let's go on very quickly to those questions which have been sent early in advance. We will work towards, okay, the first one is, how do we prepare the current workforce and the future workforce for AIs? How would it impact the way we already work today? So I think this question has come up in several forms, and it is very similar to, how do we get started, as a company or as a small establishment? What do we do?
No problem. Yes, this is actually a question that was sent early on, so I have prepared a slide to assist me in answering that question. I'm going to go to that right now. And basically, what should be our corporate Gen AI strategy? What are the basic requirements to get started? So basically, my advice would be to start with some pretty straightforward productivity gains, right? So you're thinking about the tasks that people in most companies do on a regular basis. Let's say, for example, you adopt a language model like Microsoft Copilot, which has the advantage of being already integrated with a lot of the programs you're going to be using, like Outlook for emails, Microsoft for writing documents, and just using it to assist you in writing better emails or summarizing your meeting notes, right? Or if you have an IT department, it can help them produce some code faster. It can also act as a search engine. If you've got a knowledge base, documents you use to store policies and procedures, instead of requiring of people to look through all the pages, you can plug into the AI and instead have users ask questions to the AI to get the answers. But even in those cases, it's important to know that there's a process to this. For example, you need to begin with a data permissions audit, where you need to make sure that the AI only accesses and provides information that the person asking for is entitled to. Right, so that needs to take place. There's going to be some training involved to make sure people know how to make the best use of this language model. And on top of that, part of the process, at least strongly recommended, is that you elect some of your staff to become champions, right, in this process, internal influencers that are going to become go-to resources for the other people in your departments to get assistance with AI. And these people will be empowered, to learn as much as possible and figure out how to best use AI to integrate the specific workflows that you do at your business. And as you're doing that, you're going to come across, some situations where you can take a good look at your business processes, think about what would be exciting new ways, perhaps, for users to interact with your business, or are you involved with processes that deal with natural language, processes that take time, processes that that cost a lot of money, basically. And once you start looking into those processes, you can think about further integration of AI as a phase to start seeing the same gains that we've talked about in our examples earlier. Now, these examples, all what they had in common really is that AI was really baked into significant business processes, and a system was built around AI to accelerate these processes. And down the road, that's what's going to happen with you too. But the early stages, I would suggest just getting started with productivity enhancements. That would be my answer for how to get started.
Thanks. Thank you, Jean. And Frank has posted a question. Can you ask AI to aggregate the questions that you received?
You absolutely can, by the way. Yes, that would be a task that language models are especially suited for. Combining things, summarizing things. Yeah, absolutely. You could. You could.
Yeah. That question also was raised by Elvis here as to how we can best prepare students for future where AI is increasingly prevalent in the workforce. So I think hopefully that helped you, Elvis, if you're on the call. And the next question, and again, this is an aggregate on the basic requirements to get started in AI application. So
Okay, I
what
think
was
this,
it?
yeah.
Yeah, I think
So
it
we answered a little
overlaps.
bit of that in the previous one, but I'm going to move on with the other half of that, which is, are certain skills required to use AI properly? And that's also going to touch on that topic of how do we train tomorrow's workforce, whether it's students or people currently employed. Well, basically, the first step is education. And I think just what you've learned today about what AI actually is, what these models do, and actually the limitations of those models is a great first step, because once you know what it is and how it works, then all this marketing is not going to get to you, and you're going to have a realistic portrayal in your mind of what you can achieve with it. But more to this, when it comes to language models, it might feel like you're talking to a person because of how it responds. It responds with natural language. But the truth is, you're still talking to a computer. And computers like to be talked to a certain way. Now, I know that because I'm a programmer, and I've been doing that since before AI became mainstream, and computers are very capricious, about how you talk to them. And the same applies for language models. There's actually a way in which you can structure your questions, structure your prompts, as they call them, to get the best possible response from language models. And the art of doing this, of structuring your prompts in a way that you can extract the best value out of these language models, is called prompt engineering. And it makes a big difference in what you can get out of those models. And luckily, it's a skill that anybody can learn. It's a skill that can be taught, and it's a skill that applies to the different models that exist out there, whether it's Copilot, ChatGPT, or Claude, or any of these that you've heard about. It's a bit of a universal skill. So my response would be, especially when it comes to students or people who want to update their skill set, first, being aware of the capabilities and limitations of AI is a great step forward. And being aware that prompt engineering is a practice you can learn to get the most value out of language models, that would be step two. And of course, we can help you with that.
Thank you, Sean. We've got this question around SMEs. How can SMEs adopt AI in a cost-effective way? Should they approach large software vendors to assist with the process?
Okay. Now, when it comes to SMEs, it depends what kind of SME we're talking about. But if budget is a concern, I personally would not advise automatically going for large software vendors just because of the upfront costs that you're going to have to bear. The truth is, you're probably better off to invest in an expert and use. And the good news is, when it comes to language models, there are some free ones available that you can use that are actually very powerful. I use them on a regular basis, and I'm very pleased with them. There are free language models that you can deploy. You're going to need to run them yourself, hence why you need a tech expert. But you can use these models for free to get started. And so at the end of the day, you're only going to be paying for the expert to put all that together. So that would be kind of the cheapest way to get started. This being said, there are commercial models which are not expensive. For example, Copilot, anybody who's using Windows right now, it's built in. You can use it for free. So if you wanted to dip your toes into that, you could leverage that. And they also have the Copilot website, which you can, if you're on Mac or another operating system, you can access. So there are free models that you can use that I believe personally are quite powerful. You can get a lot of value out of those. So I would advise a startup to focus on that at the beginning. And instead of going from some big software vendor solution, maybe invest in an expert that's just going to set that up for you.
No, that
Yeah.
would be that would be very helpful. in terms of, just making it quick and easy. How does AI transform the HR function? Would there be significant negative impacts? I guess this is coming from a HR practitioner right now.
Right, right. I mean, when it comes to HR, there are challenges, but what I would say is first, from a hiring perspective, knowing perhaps that your company wants to become powered by AI or wants to implement AI. I've just talked about prompt engineering. It's possibly a skill that you might start looking for in some of the candidates that you will hire. In order to make sure that they can make the most out of the tools that you're going to make available to them. But when it comes to dealing with the hiring process, that's a bit more nebulous because the biggest challenge you have right now is that people can use AI to write their cover letters and things like that. Now, people have been gaming their resumes for ages, and now, unfortunately, they're able to do it a little bit more efficiently, but it also opens new doors for you because you can use language models to extract information from those resumes in a way that I think is a lot more efficient than the systems that relied on older technology. So there's a bit of a gain and a bit of a loss. I think the balance is going to be in the middle.
Okay. We have one question about China. How are the limitations in China going to affect the development of AI in the Chinese market?
Okay, limitations of AI in the Chinese market. I mean, there are language models developed in China. And I don't see any sign of them slowing down because the algorithms to train these models, they're out there. Anybody can actually use them. And they've been using them to build models that are especially good at dealing with the Chinese language, which is no easy task. And there are even some, when I mentioned there were some free ones available to the public, that includes some of the models developed by China. So I don't see any sign of that slowing down. And what we can take into account as well is that in order to train these models, we need a lot of data. And you can be certain that in China, they have a very large pool of data that they can pull from to teach these models. So I really don't think there's actually going to be any slowing down on the Chinese side for these language models.
All right, we're going to open it up to the floor. And if anyone has raised their hands in any way or want to put in a question in the chat room, I'm happy to take that now. Otherwise, we are running out of time. We possibly can do just one more question.
Okay, well, there's another one. Okay, so I remember receiving a question about agents, and there's also a question in the chat about SMEs, a follow-up question about SMEs. So I'm going to try to tackle both of these questions as quick as I can. Moving on to the questions about agents. I remember that was forwarded to me early on. What's an AI agent and what does it do? Now, you remember at the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned that language models or AI models in general don't actually do much, right? They take an input and produce an output. In the case of language models, it's text. But on the same occasion, you're hearing stories, I'm sure, of people saying that I've got an AI agent who's booking flights for me or making restaurant reservations. So how can the two of these things be true at the same time if AI doesn't do much? Well, the answer is simply that these AI agents are systems that leverage AI as a component, but there's other components surrounding it. And in this case, the system contains pre-programmed actions that it can take, like making a reservation or booking a flight. And the AI component is just a translation layer where somebody says, I want to make a reservation, I want to book a flight. The language model digests that request and chooses which of the pre-programmed functions the system should execute. And the system will observe the language model's response and trigger these actions. This is how agents are built. It's very, very powerful, very exciting, but as I mentioned, it's not just AI by itself. It requires some work. It requires a full system to be built around it. But there's exciting opportunities out there. You just have to be careful and put on some safeguards because you don't want to be like this car dealership that was in the news recently where they just deployed a chatbot by itself, right, with no guardrails, and it started offering deals on cars for $1, right, because people were using prompt engineering to manipulate the language model into making these deals, right? So just be careful about how you approach this. Give us a call, right? And to answer that question in the chat, examples of free expert you referred to. Okay. The best free model that comes to my mind is called Llama 3. It's actually been built by Meta, which is the company behind Facebook. They've been releasing this model called Llama for free for quite some time. They're now at version 3.2. And I've been using it on a personal basis, and it's excellent. I think for getting started, the fact that it's free, it's actually kind of amazing. So if anything, if somebody wanted to play around with the free models, you're going to need a little bit of technical expertise to set things up. But then after that, when it's all said and done, you have a free model you can run. I think it's an amazing one. So it's called Llama 3, and it's from Meta. That would be my recommendation.
Jean, we have a question on supply chain, and this
Okay.
is on machine learning. Do you wish to take it?
Sure, let's do it.
Yeah. Can you provide some examples of how AI is currently being used in real-world application to improve efficiency or decision-making in supply chain operations?
Okay. So in this case, that's not really a question about language models, because language models are focused in the area of natural language. So when we're talking about optimizing a supply chain, for example, we're going back to the parent of language models, which is machine learning. And machine learning, again, is the process of teaching a computer to recognize patterns in data. So if you have a supply chain and you're collecting data about that supply chain, data about the vendors, about the deals, prices, and whatnot, logistics, you could feed that to a learning model, not a language model, but a traditional machine learning model, to derive insights from that data that would take a human way too long to figure out, but that the computer can do much faster. There's three main things that machine learning can do for you. The first one is called clustering, which is recognizing groups within the data, identifying groups within the data. So for example, if you have information about your customers, it would help you identify the different segments within the population of customers that you have. The second thing it can do is classification. For example, if you have, it's the art of categorizing data, essentially. So if you have a lot of data about transactions, and you know that some of them were fraudulent, you can give examples of good transactions and fraudulent transactions to a machine learning model, and eventually, based on the patterns it has learned, it would be able to flag future transactions about whether or not they might be fraudulent because these patterns have been recognized. And the last one would be regression, which is the ability for an AI model to predict numbers based on numbers it has seen before. So sales forecasts based on past data. So machine learning can help with these three things. That's not something for language models. It's something for machine learning.
All right. Thank you so much. Jean, I'm going to be sharing a last screen.
Okay, I'm going to stop my sharing here.
Okay, just let me... Okay, so thank you so much for that, everyone. I know we've run out of time over here, but happy to connect with you. If you have any other questions, I hope all of you can see my screen. My contact details are there. Likewise, company contact details are there. Please connect with us and let us know if you have continuing questions for us. You know, I hope you've enjoyed today's session. I know it was a quick one, 30 minutes, fast and furious. On the 16th of October, we're going to be talking about what is social impact. And this is particularly important for corporates as well as social enterprises, you know, who are collaborating a lot with the community. I mean, for example, the retail sector and how it's impacting the circular economy. Housing, how that is impacting the larger community at large over here. So Pia Wong, another one of our experts, will be speaking on the 16th of October at 4 p.m. Again, 9 a.m. in Europe, and I hope you can join us. So please feel free to connect with us again and sign up. Thank you, everyone, for this call, and thank you again, Jean-Sebastien Lemay. It was great listening to you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for showing up. It was nice to see you.
All right.